That is the demise of Rugby New York. If you guys don't know, the Rugby New York Ironworkers of Major League Rugby had to call it. Yo, they said, we're done. We can't do this anymore. This is the second team. We just talked about this a couple weeks ago, last week. Second team in 10 days with the Toronto Arrows shutting down the MLR, effectively creating the fear and the doubt and the concern that, yo, is MLR still going to be holding on? Can we still keep this going on? So before, we kind of delve into, breaking down an analysis of what this is, let's kind of talk about what's happening here right now. All right. So with the MLR, we have obviously a startup league, started 2018. So it's still fairly young, trying to find their way. The concept of it was basically initially supposed to be teams that were already established. If you guys remember from pro rugby back in 2016, 2017, before that became a whole controversy, the idea with them was a single owner who controlled multiple teams, a central place, and then these teams are basically at the behest of that. MLR came with the other side of it and said, hey, let's go with the more U.S. American sports model, traditional model of individual franchise owners, and we're going to build them off from already established clubs, right? So you had well-off, I'm not going to necessarily say wealthy, but well-off owners who were willing to invest in putting together this professional team. And the hopes is that with the professional team, be able to, I think at the time, be able to woo the Rugby World Cup 2031 as well, but also increase the development and provide a 24/7 capability for players to be able to grow and develop in the U.S. and be able to have our competition equivalent to Premier League Rugby, Premier Rugby, Top 14, Super Rugby, Japan League One, any of those, right? And we would have already had an internal connection with it because they were based off of clubs. And of course, as things evolve, you realize that you have to rebrand and kind of separate. And so you had this dynamicness of, the Seattles, San Diego's initially, Denver before they disassociated themselves, Austin, obviously, before that whole situation happened, New Orleans, Atlanta, Boston, and eventually New York would come in 2019. So it made sense from a passionate standpoint that this is something that could be possible. And it was something that I think was needed. It had been very consistent trying to get a pro league, and professionalization in rugby in terms of league is only barely 26 years old, 1994, 1995 officially is when it happened. So we're talking 28 years old, almost 30 years old of professionalization of rugby legally. There's people getting money under the table. Obviously, rugby league had been doing it themselves for a while, but rugby league, rugby union, two different elements. So why are we at this point right now? Because we are, to say the least, within something of a rugby recession. A lot of people feel like this is something that's happening with MLR, but the reality is, this is a worldwide concept that's going on. If you don't know, previously with Premiership Rugby, they officially lost two teams, and definitely, though not Premiership, a third team that was, I think, set to be URC and the London Irish. So the Worcester Warriors in Premiership Rugby, the Wasps, and then the London Irish. Three traditional generational teams, been around for 100 years. All three folded. And so this worry of singularity of American rugby not working is not something that is just singular to us. But as I've understood it, when it comes to the, MLR's model, there's been, the reality of what it is to run a pro team. And I think there's some differences that obviously come between running a pro team in 1962 or 1952 or 1932 versus running a pro team in 2023, 2018, and definitely in the post-pandemic era, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. Night and day differences, different costs, different requirements. The viewers are different. The environment is different. The culture is different. It is hard to do it. Plus, in the US, obviously, we're the proverbial masters of sports entertainment across board. We have more sports that are professionalized or at the top of entertainment than probably any other country in the world. You can say soccer, obviously, is the number one sport in terms of professionalization in the world, but the NFL is the number one professional sport in terms of profitability and gains. So, Premiership soccer was created as a derivative because of what they saw the NFL doing itself. So, when you're talking about U.S. sports, you have expectations that have to be made, and everybody has a movement that goes with it. Whether you were NBA, NFL, NHL, MLS, expectations that go with it. But with that, it also comes certain requirements. A lot of people, if you look at it from the surface up, you're talking about, hey, we just need to get on ESPN, get our people to go support, and we'll make this work. We'll get this going. Unfortunately, there's more to the game than that, and this is what New York has come into it. With the creation, many wealthy people and wealthy investor groups put into the MLR. If you guys know the history of New York, it started off with I can't remember the guy who does construction. It got sold off to a investor group, including one of the top 14 billionaires, top 14 rugby owners, who's a billionaire, invested in it, and this was now where the next sell-off was going to be. In addition to that, obviously there is a payment fee, the franchise fee that goes into putting into the MLR to be able to support it, get the club. Definitely is significantly higher now than it was at the 200,000 level that it was going into 2018. I think from what I heard last, it's somewhere between 5 and 10 million to be able to put in for a team. But also the costs have been heavy, and every state has a different set of costs and a different set of requirements. But luckily there was a big pool that was happening. It all really started falling apart. We know the situation with the Giltinis, with the Giltini, Gilchrist, situation with his whole wealth and franchise and business system crumbling underneath him in Australia, hence releasing out Austin Gilgronis and the Los Angeles Giltinis. But the real hit for MLR really took place in August with the passing of Bill Webb. And I know I'm being long-winded because this is a podcast, so I can. But it's very important to understand what these dynamics are going into it. So the loss of Bill Webb was, one, having Bill Webb, who's one of the wealthiest owners in rugby. Like, a lot of people who know who he was, I didn't get to know him, unfortunately, but people who've talked about him to say how amazing of a guy he is, how dedicated of a rugby player is, and this was his passion project. So this man was helping to fund MLR. I've heard things like, when it came to the workers' comp situation, Canada doesn't require a workers' comp situation because they have the free health care, but he was willing to put in, Bill Webb was willing to put in for that so that the rest of the teams in the U.S. could be able to hold that up, because it's cheaper when you do it in groups versus do it as individuals. Many of the follies that would be happening with it, with MLR, was able to get covered up because the man had the money to be able to hold it off. He's a legit billionaire. He was a legit billionaire. But when he passed, while it was in his will to want to, keep the MLR team together, he's got investment managers that are there to hold the trust together, that it distributes money for the rest of forever, or as long as money is available for his wife and kids and his kids' kids and his kids' kids' kids. Like, This is the point of it. And they did not feel like Toronto Arrows were a worthy investment. And obviously, boom, we lose them because investors didn't put in. And then we're having a similar situation with New York. New York is a team that obviously is in a great market, but great market potentially, great market in theory, but it's not necessarily the greatest market when it comes to being able to monetize itself. Obviously, one of the biggest issues is stadium space. Another issue is practice space. New York City isn't exactly known for its massive amount of field space available to it, and it's costly. It's costly. So whenever you're talking about the MLR teams, and like I said, every team has different expenses. But when you're talking about the MLR teams and what the level of support and what they're doing and how they get things on, it costs a lot. And as of today, there's been estimates that the MLR is losing somewhere around $50 million per year. Per year. Now, let me to the other side. It's probably only making about $2 million per year collectively. And that might be pushing it. So when you're talking about bringing people in to invest, what are they trying to be able to invest in? And this plays into very heavily into what is the problems that are going on. So New York had a couple capital calls. A capital call is basically whenever you are able to bring the money required to continue either your franchise fee, your set fee, bring your money to be able to do this next year rotation of rugby, be able to take care of your bills, because MLR is a collective, so all the money is pooled together and the players are paid out of that collective. Administrative fees are taken out of that collective. So the MLR actually, from what I understand, had actually missed a couple capital calls before Thanksgiving. In fact, they actually missed their deadline. Was supposed to be on Black Friday. But because the Toronto situation had happened, allegedly, the Toronto situation happened, but allegedly, they wanted to give an extension to be able to find their investors to be able to put in for this group. And apparently they had a group that was on hand, but one of the investors jumped out because they did not feel like this was a comfortable or viable investment for them to be able to do. They just were not seeing the line to profitability. And so with this extension that happened after Black Friday, the hope was they were going to be able to replace that investor. Well, it looks like there is a chance that they lost another person within it, allegedly. This is what I'm hearing around the scope. Got peoples around, all right? Been in this for a while, so I got my peoples around. But they lost it. So now you're looking not just for one, for two investors to be able to significantly finish up this capital call that's going on so that Rugby New York can continue. And if you guys have been paying attention, while many teams have been announcing, sources, transfers, trades, signings, etc., New York has been very, very quiet. Very, very quiet about who they can. And it's very significant to understand, like, you're not just talking about, oh, man, it's a player that's here in this state and moving to over here and here and over to here. No, we're also talking about visas for players, for staff, for coaches. That all has to be paid in advance. It's stadium fees. It's everything. So this was being held up, not just for the capital call, but to be able to also move on with everything else going on. And unfortunately, they weren't able to make that capital call. And it happens when people say this is something that goes on with growing pains of the sport. This is factually true. This is something that happens with growing pains with the sport. But it only happens if your model is something that's a work in progress. And I think as of right now, we have a lot of issues on it. Now, there's a lot of teams that have felt like, maybe the MLR is getting their stuff together, and you got to give shout outs to them. You got to hold up for your people. But again, a lot of this issue comes into what is the model for it. Now, what are the things that the teams responded? I want to talk about this because I think it's important to see where thoughts and minds are going when it comes to this. One was from the Utah Warriors. The Utah Warriors with this, and for them, they threw out Kimball Kajar, who again is one of the co-founders. He's a business guy. He understands obviously startups, and he wrote a nice little letter. Warrior Nation, I'm going to read it out to you guys. Warrior Nation, my professional background is and always has been in startup companies. While they are exciting, they are also hard. With Major League Rugby's recent news regarding New York dissolving, and in context of Toronto's unfortunate and saddening situation with Bill Webb's passing, I can't underscore enough that this is one of those hard moments that all startups face. Despite the two teams' reasons for withdrawal from the MLR being wholly separate and unique, we acknowledge that this puts a lot of lives in very rough spots, and we hope to support any and all players and staff from Toronto, New York, where and however we can. We also know these teams built and were a part of two amazing rugby communities, and we feel for you at this time. All professional sports leagues face these early days startup challenges. The MLS, the NBA, and the juggernaut of the NFL saw growth, contraction, dissolution of teams, and everything in between their respective formative years. To think that the MLR would be any different would be foolish. The Utah Warriors, along with the other 10 amazing ownership groups and teams in the MLR, are committed to growing this amazing professional sports league into the world's most exciting and competitive sports and entertainment market of North America. Although today is a bad day for everyone. Sorry, my eyes are going out a little bit, so bear with me. Bad day for everyone. Within the New York community. Yeah, I'm getting old. I can't see the rest of it because my eyes are tired from looking at the screen. Anyways, the point is, yada, yada, yada. We're doing stuff. We get things going on, and the MLR will be able to continue. Just wait and give us patience. Basically, the gist of it, if you may. So, like I said, it's something that is you could say is a normal constriction, but it's not. This isn't normal because we're not in normal situations. If this was in 2000 or in 2010 even, where the idea is we need to reach eyes. With those eyes, we want to be able to sell product. With those products, we want to get distribution deals. Distribution being, from television, ESPN, Fox, whatever. And they pay us, and then we pay our players off of that, and we can create our salary cap, and we increase and develop. This is how everybody else did it. We can talk about the NBA in 1979 that was doing televised championships until Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Lakers versus Boston championship happening. But the fact of the matter is they actually still had deals in terms of their CBS contracts. Not very many. And also the environment for sporting was much different, much more constricted. So people are more likely to make it. But obviously we did have a lot of teams that came in and came out, especially after the ABA-NBA merger. We can talk about the NFL. And of course, they've had in recent years addition of teams, movement of teams, especially in the 90s. But once again, you had TV contracts, Fox in 1993. You had CBS and ABC since 1960-something. You had college rugby that was already a transitioning point. So people already had kind of a method and culture for it. So we're not talking apples to apples in this when we're talking about the constriction and restriction of MLR. And in this day and age, media rights are getting incredibly difficult to be able to have. Incredibly difficult to be able to attain. So it's not exactly the same. And then you add one additional caveat, because now that you've gone from 13 teams to down to 11, you have one additional caveat: the increase of the players union that will substantially increase whatever the cost will be. Now, a statement from the players union, I found it on rugbyunionnow.com. You can find it. I actually found it on X, and then they were on.com. I don't want to look at their website, but a great statement by Chris Mattina, where it says, "We are more than pawns in a chess game and are tired of waking up to the news that we have been removed from the board. We're human and have families that count on us and pay bills, which is completely fair. The players need some stability in their lives. Nick Savetta, who's the USA Rugby Players Association chair, said, "This has never been about players wanting more money. Our campaign is solely focused on driving the league to sit down and have honest conversations about with the players about how we can move the game forward in a way that prioritizes player welfare, contract security, and safety." All that is true. All that is true. But the reality is it is about money as well, too. And that's what's making this scared. You want to ask why are the investors dropping out? Because of the fact that they're scared of what the players union creation is. And I'm not, once again, not saying the players union shouldn't be created. Players union absolutely needs to be created because obviously you get dicked around way too many times. Like it's too difficult for grown folks with families to be able to substantially maintain their families, maintain equitable pay as per necessary, and to be able to predict where they are. There's people who have left, rugby professionally because they were just like, this isn't worth it. This isn't worth it, So that's nothing against them in that. But again, note what I said before. I told you before, the economics have not been good. The MLR is losing $50 million a year, making $2 million a year. The pays are, equating to that, and the stability of where players go are equating to that. Now, probably could do something about the stability and the equitability of that, but the lack of health insurance, uncertainty in housing and living, like obviously players that come from overseas, visas, like it's so much that's going on. So you add this component in, and it becomes a heart attack. It becomes a heart attack because, again, the model for doing rugby as it was before, not rugby, but doing sports business as it was before is not the same. Streaming has completely changed the game. And the irony of having streaming where you have more access, you also are making less money on your property. Why? Because there is more real estate available to be able to put the games on and to be able to do it. And hence, people are not paying as much. If you really truly believe that $7.99 a month, even if you have 100 million people, is going to be able to hold the same as somebody who is getting $5.99 guaranteed for 150 million people per channel, and not even having to think about where that money is going to be coming from, because that plus your advertising income. I mean, it's a whole different game now. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars that are no longer being sent out. We see the situation, if you paid attention, ESPN and Disney going through constriction, a concern that ESPN might get spun off from Disney again, or ESPN becoming almost solely a digital channel because it's just not paying the bills like it used to, even though it was one of the most profitable elements. And especially because it's sports that has people attention, because it's must-see TV. It's very wild that it's not being able to hold. So, all these deals, if you're not getting new deals in, it's not going to be consistent. And the model that the MLR has been using has been the same one that was used over the course of the last 50, 60 years. Build your audience, get sponsorships, get obviously sell tickets, and subsequently get the TV deals. TV deals being the greatest cost. Greatest earning potential. That's what it's like for the NFL. NFL doesn't care that much about fans in the stadiums like they did before, because they get guaranteed TV money, but they also have an audience of 150 million and then some. But that's not what happened with MLR. The audience for the USA is significantly smaller than what's being predicted. I know we got numbers like 2 million, 4 million that's out there. Clearly significantly smaller. Clearly significantly smaller. Any numbers that you can see, even whenever you look at the biggest games, when their Nielsen ratings or the data ratings come in, it's not the same. So when you're looking at what's happening with Rugby New York, and they're not getting investors or people not wanting to be able to put more money into this, this is the issue that's happening right now. The model is completely jacked up. Completely jacked up. And if it continues as such, it's very difficult for it to be able to continue towards any level of profitability, let alone break even. I forgot to even talk about the fact that Atlanta shut down. Mind you, moved up to Los Angeles, technically. But, it's part of that issue. People don't want to pay for this because it's just not returning and they don't see a future in it. And the whole idea of this was that it sets it up so that we can get the Rugby World Cup. And from the Rugby World Cup, we're going to mimic what happened in 1996, where the World Cup came to Atlanta and there was a surge in soccer participation going into 1997. And MLS was now created to be able to withstand and hold and yada, yada. And now we're at this point where it is still, bottom league in terms of world comparison, but, more profitable because the franchise price has gone up. It's actually only starting to get a little bit more popular amongst younger people. But the idea has been within this element, and it doesn't work for rugby. It doesn't work for rugby because the idea for rugby needed to be on the factor that you need to be innovative. So,